Now that classes are starting up again, I wanted to give you a few tips on how to get that A in all your classes, or at least attempt to get that A. Now, these tips are not going to guarantee you an A, of course, but I think they'll get you a little bit closer to understanding how sort of university education works and how you might be able to advance your grades a little bit in those classes. So one of the first things that's really important to understand in order to understand how to get an A in a class is to understand the professor, the person who's teaching you, and what they're really focused on in the classroom, how they teach, and how they test. Because ultimately, the way you get an A is by getting good grades on the exams or the evaluation process. And in order to do that, you really got to get to know the professor a little bit. Now, some of that might come before you even take the class. You talk to other students, you find out what kind of professor this is. There are different kinds of professors, and some professors are easier than others in terms of their grading style. But most of all, they're really just different in terms of their grading styles. Some professors might grade more on effort, on attendance. Some might grade more on kind of multiple choice tests, or some might grade more on the active participation elements, or some might grade more on kind of essay response. And so you have to know how your professor is grading and how your professor is interested in evaluating you in order to know what kind of system you should use to study for that professor's class. Now, if you get to know the professor's style a little bit, the other thing you need to understand is when they're providing their lectures or when they're delivering the material to you, you have to figure out what's important and what's not important. Once you figure out the kind of style that the professor uses for evaluation, you'll be better able to determine what actually they're testing you on during the evaluation process when they're lecturing. Sometimes professors might say the same thing 3 or 4 times, and that's a really good indication that this is going to be important. Sometimes professors even tell you this is going to be on the test. And you got to really understand how the professor teaches in order to figure out exactly what they're going to put on the test. So 2 things really important right off the bat. One is get to know the professor, get to know their style of teaching. Second thing is get to know their evaluation and how they evaluate for the grades, right? So those 2 things are really important right off the bat. Now the third thing that I think is really important is to learn how to study. Now, different kinds of evaluation styles or different kinds of professors are going to use different kinds of tests and different kinds of evaluation methods. Students need to learn how to study for those different kinds of tests, and they're very different. Studying for a multiple choice test is quite different from studying for an open book test. It's very different from studying during the kind of project-based exams, like how you present information for the audience, for the professor. All of those evaluation methods really require a different kind of studying, and you have to learn how to study for each of those in order to develop the skills to get an A in your class. And finally, you need to put the work in. Now, I'm a firm believer that anybody can get an A. But when I say that, I mean that different people have to put different amounts of work in order to get that A. Not everyone can walk into a class and put the same amount of effort as everyone else and still get the same grade. Sometimes people are a little bit less skilled at a particular kind of test or less skilled at a particular kind of area. You know, if a student takes my Introduction to International Relations class and they've already taken 3 other IR classes, but they didn't take the intro class, they're going to have a significant advantage because they already have some knowledge based in international relations when they come to my class. They also might know me really well. So if you take the same class, if you take the same professor's class 3 or 4 times in different contexts, then you understand me, you understand how I test, and you understand how to get an A+ in the class. So all of those things are going to be giving you slight advantages. So again, just to remind you what those 3 things are. 1, get to know your professors, get to know their style of teaching, get to know how they differentiate the information from the important stuff and the not important stuff. Second thing, you got to understand the style of the professor's evaluation systems, what kind of things that they test for, are they going to use multiple choice tests or essay tests, and how you study for those things is the third part of this process of getting a good grade in the class. Learning how to study for a particular type of evaluation system is very, very important, and study differently depending on the kind of evaluation the professor is using.